It's gone.
Okay, awesome. All right, so welcome everyone to our fourth webinar series. So for those of you who this is your first time, I'll give you an overview of what we do here. For those of you guys who are tuning in through YouTube, hopefully you've been following up with our series. So this is our fourth series. So today we're going to learn how to write and design a research proposal, and just this idea that we started from the bottom and now we're here. So we're on the fourth part of our series. As always, I just want to start off to make this a safe space for everyone. I know that with the political climate that's going on, it may not feel like you're in a safe space at your institutions or wherever you are, but I want you to know that you are safe here. So feel free to speak your mind, but for all of us to be respectful of each other so that we can all come and hopefully learn in this space. Okay. So the overall goal of the series. So the goal of this mini series is to increase member awareness of research, to help members identify research opportunities, and to provide members with tools to successfully design, execute, and present research findings. And so irrespective of where you are on your life journey, whether you're trying to get into medicine or you're interested in or you're just trying to figure out, what you're interested in, research is an important aspect of just about everything. Everything you do involves some type of research, even if you don't know it. And so I'm glad to see you guys are here, and I'm hoping that you guys will gain something from it. So overview of the series. So we highlighted our very last one. So our first webinar series, we talked about the types of research. The second, we talked about mentor-mentee relationships. Webinar 3, we walked through how to read an academic paper. And here we are, webinar 4 for designing and writing a research proposal. I also want to let you guys know that webinar 5, we'll talk about how to write an abstract with an idea that hopefully you've been keeping up, and so that you are right kind of at that place with us, so that as you're conducting your project, you kind of know what's happening from there. Okay, awesome. So why we're doing this. So we have a measure or a marker that we're trying to measure, and that is we're trying to increase awareness of our Wilber C. Jordan Research Forum. And so it was founded by SNMA to be at AMEC about 20 or so years ago. And it really just gives an opportunity for minority students to present research that they've been working on, to be able to put on their resume that they've presented their research findings somewhere, that they went to an annual conference. So if you are trying to get into medical school, I found that is certainly a distinguishing factor that can help you for your application. I also believe so in residency, even though I'm not there yet. I'm a second-year medical student. But I just wanted to let everyone know about that, and so that we're hoping that by doing this webinar series, we can increase the number of new researchers or people who may have been a little interested in research and weren't sure how to get there. We're hoping that we can increase your awareness so that you can you'll think about applying to put your research project here and to present that in front of everyone. And so we wrote the what you need to accomplish in order to do that. It's really simple. You really just want to have a scientific project that you're working on. At the very bottom, you can see that where the fields are in basic science, clinical science, social science, and obesity or health complications of obesity. So just about every project that you can imagine, if it's to advance, not just in medicine, but to just advance research knowledge, it is welcome here at the Research Forum. So I really hope that you all will think about that. I do believe abstracts are due sometime in mid-January. And so if you want to know more information about that, you want to go to snma.org. Melissa or Alex, if one of you guys would drop that in so that they can find that in case they're interested. We'll also try to put that on the PowerPoint slides so you guys can find that as well. I also just want to point to you guys that in the very top left corner, there's a QR code. So as we're going through this, if you have feedback that you want to give us, feel free to scan that on your phone and to give direct feedback of how we're doing or things that you kind of were expecting coming in if we didn't meet the mark. So we're always trying to get better. Okay, so format of series. So very briefly, I'm going to give a brief lecture. The point of the lecture is just to level the playing field of all educational backgrounds. And so we have a panel of experts in the field. And so we know there may be some terms that they use or some jargon that you may not be familiar with, even if they do their best. It's just that we want to get everyone up to speed and to make sure that we can have a productive panel for the next hour. So 30 minutes, I'm going to try to make this interesting as possible. I'm going to stick very closely to the 30 minutes. I do not run over. And so that again, that we can have a productive panel together. Okay, so research proposals. So how to structure them and how to write them. So the three major things we're gonna talk about. So I'm gonna describe the importance of a proposal. I'm gonna tell you how to narrow the scope of your proposal, and then I'm gonna tell you the basic structure of a proposal, leaving a couple of things out, more so because that would probably be something that your mentor would probably wanna do, but I wanna give you some basic knowledge of the things that you need to accomplish in order to do it. And for those of you who are in medical school or not in medical school, everything is around learning objectives. And so I hope that you will grade me on these learning objectives. So what I hope to do, the first thing I hope to do is to give you a basic understanding of project planning. So we'll talk about project planning, the institutional review board, and then city training, what those three things are and why they're important. We'll talk about how I hope that you'll gain an understanding of how to construct a strong research proposal, things that your graders may be looking for, or that your mentor may be looking for in questions that they may have, so that you can kind of avoid that step. And then lastly, I hope you gain an understanding of how to create a project schedule, a budget, and then a dissemination plan. And so we'll talk about the importance of that and some stakeholders that you want to think about as you're doing that. So I just always put a homework check-in. So every lecture I try to give, I want to give homeworks. I want you all to walk away with something. And so if you are watching or remotely, if you've been on a couple of our other webinar series, I'm hoping that you've already begun a literature review. It's important, and I'll talk about why that is. We'll talk about solidifying your mentor. And then again, I'm hoping that you have your project proposal already done. Okay, so without that, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. So creating a project plan. So there are four things that I know that I certainly think about when I'm creating a project plan. So the first thing is, what's my approach? So at the end of the project, what do I really want to deliver? What do I really want to get accomplished? And so I think about that at the very beginning. The next thing I do is I kind of scope out, all right, what's my overall topic that I'm staying in. So if I'm interested in diabetes research, I just can't throw diabetes research out there. I need to scope it down. Am I looking for a certain population group? Am I looking for certain outcomes? How am I going to measure that? And so I try to scope that down. And we'll talk about this idea of being too narrow, and that there may not be enough research out there about what you exactly want. And so we'll talk about how to maybe balance scoping too broadly or scoping too narrowly. Constraints. So if you're in school, you know that you're probably limited on time. You may be limited on resources. Your mentor may not have unlimited resources. They may not have a huge NIH lab that they're working with, right? And so you may want to survey everybody in your entire school, but that may not be possible just based on resources and as well as time. So those are things that you want to take into consideration as well. And then lastly, stakeholders. Who's invested in your project? Who wants to know what the outcome is? Who's going to be interested in knowing, from point A to point B? How can you get them involved so that you can mitigate some of the roadblocks that may come up pretty early? And then as well, are there any people that can tell you, no, you can't do something? And so we'll talk about the IRB, who can either be your best friends, or they can sideline a lot of the projects you have, and not necessarily they don't want you to do the project, but because they're definitely taking into consideration the ethical roles of research and making sure that you're not bringing undue harm to any patients or research participants. Okay, so now let's go ahead and jump into it. So some things to consider. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do is, any type of research you're doing, you want to do what's called city training. And city training is a research ethics and compliance training. And so this organization has a series of modules that they've completed. It's normally required for you to conduct any type of research, and it's free to register. So for example, when I was an undergrad, I signed up for city training. I happened to sign up under the University of Virginia, which is where I went. And I just wanted to see, hey, what's out there? How can I gain information? And so that's something that you're interested in. Their very basic course is called their biomedical research basic refresher course. It's also free on their website. And it's something to help you get started. I can't begin to tell you how many projects your mentor may jump in and say, hey, let's do this. And then they're like, oh, actually, I need you to do city training. And it can be daunting and arduous. And so it's something that if you start early, I think it lasts for about 2 years, I believe 2 years. But it's like, if you keep up to date with this, is something that you don't have to worry about, and you can kind of just jump right in. And it'll also give you a lot of great information about why research is the way that it is, and then some trials that happen, and why there is an IRB. The second thing is, what is an IRB? So the institutional review board is something that's unique to just about every institution, depending on where you are. And so just like city training, this is actually an ethical committee that will judge your research project, your proposal, and it'll be looking for opportunities to make sure that again, you're protecting your patients and those that are going to get enrolled. And so they want to make sure that you have, all clear steps. If you are going to work directly with patients, they want to make sure that you have an informed consent plan or informed consent form that's going to help the people that you enroll understand, what the research is, what they will gain or won't gain from it, and why you're doing the project in general, as well as while they'll be compensated for their participation, and to make sure that you don't coerce anyone. So you may think like, hey, no, that why wouldn't they want to do this? Is for science, we want to get better, right? And so, but someone may read that and think that as a person in the healthcare field, you're telling them they need to do this for their health, and they're doing it because, and they don't understand why. And so that's something that the IRB will be able to tell you whether you're doing well or you're doing not well. And so you don't want to get your project hung up on the IRB. And so it's always, what I always do is I try to let the IRB review my project before I want them to consider it, see if there's any hangups, become friends with the director or whoever's on that kind of board to try to navigate some of these issues so that when your proposal's there and done, hopefully it can be a faster process. Because I've seen IRBs hang things up just because things may not be explained well, or they're not understanding what exactly you're trying to accomplish. So just some tips there that I've learned in my past training. So research proposal content. So this is not a totally inclusive group of things. There are a couple of things that I'm leaving out, but I believe that these 4 are what mentors would at least let their students be involved in. 4 is kind of iffy, but 1, the background and significance, I for sure think that that's something that can be accomplished. I actually encourage you to work with your mentor and do this. You can learn a lot about the topic that you're learning about. And as if you want to present your research, right, you should know what the significance is, because I will tell you that at a lot of these national conferences, if you are presenting with doctors there, they're going to want to know and they're going to grill you. And so you want to know the significance so that you are also aware of just the things that are going on in the field to be able to defend your project. Especially if you're interested in getting a PhD dissertation or anything like that, or master's degree in clinical research, you're going to want to defend your work. And it also is a great way for you to just gain more information. Your research aims. So what are your objectives that your project's going to fill? And so having those listed out very clearly so that you can go back to them and say, hey, did I answer these research claims? Does this make sense of how I'm walking through my methods and my steps to get there? Your number 3, your design and your methods, which may sound easy, but there are certain things that you want to consider as you're doing that. And as again, that will help you really scope the project down. And then lastly, your project timeline and then your budget. So we'll talk very briefly about that, but I'll spend most of my time talking about numbers 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So background versus significance. So this was something that was very difficult for me because I always saw the 2 of them put together. So background is more so you introducing relevant information that's in the literature. And then you're also finding an opportunity to relate past projects to your current project. And so I've learned that if you can tell the IRB, for example, what other research projects have happened before, to say like, hey, NIH signed off on these projects, my project's not so far-fetched, here's the data, here's what you can see there. I believe that when you start, at least in my personal opinion, when I've cited a lot of different projects that have already happened, especially if they're attached to the NIH or to reputable research labs, I've been able to, the IRB is like, oh, okay, like, all right, that sounds good to me. Again, content like dependent on IRBs, but the IRBs that I've worked with, and at least in the past 2 years, have been okay with that. Significance. So significance is, again, why is your research proposal important to your field of interest? This doesn't mean necessarily that you have to come up with a completely new project. The project that you're looking at may have been done in one population group, and now you want to do it in another population group. And it's important because we don't have research in an African American population. So you may be looking at some methods that happened with another group. They came up to one conclusion, or maybe someone else came up with a null hypothesis and you want to build a bigger population sample. And so it's significant because you don't feel like what they proposed represented the population group that you're interested in studying. As well, if you're acknowledging any research gaps in that either other papers have already talked about. So if you were on our very last webinar, we talked about how a lot of research projects in the abstract, they'll tell you, and in the conclusion, there should be, this warrants further research, or further research in the field should do X, Y, Z. And so if you're referencing that and saying, hey, this paper that was published, very recently, again, you want to go with recent, acknowledge this gap. As so far in literature, we don't have an answer to this gap. let's go through, let's figure out what it is. And this is why my project is important. This is why I believe in this project. And this is why I believe it should happen. And so being able to learn how to effectively convince your reader that what you're doing is important. And so that's extremely, it's so helpful, I would believe. And so I just wanted to explain the two differences between the two, so that as you're writing your background, you want to make sure that you have both of these there, so that again, you're getting your point across. Okay, so background and significance. So questions to ask after you write it. So I found that if you say, hey, is there enough background information to justify this project? If there's not, right, so that may be a scoping problem. So is it too broad or is it too narrow? Is there just not enough research, which you want to do? And that's great because you want to do the research, but you may need to take a couple of steps to get to your actual question, to be able to say like, hey, I need to get this information first before I scope it down to my very, very specific population that I'm looking at. Have I demonstrated enough knowledge of literature? So I, for example, wrote a background and significance section. I cited maybe 3 papers. And so the question was, oh, only 3 papers? That's it? So I'm not gonna say there's a number, but I mean, 3 certainly wasn't enough. And so I knew that I needed to do more there. Every time I made a claim, I needed to be able to cite somewhere. And so I just wanted to point that out, that was a question that I failed to ask, and I bit the dust for it. Have I positioned my project in a way to describe why it'll have a meaningful contribution? So again, did I write my significance in a way that I know what's important to me, but isn't also important to other people? And do I articulate that well? Have I cited, again, relevant literature? And then really important, have I avoided jargon, conceptual mistakes, abbreviations, spelling or grammar, and lofty statements? So again, the IRB, they may know what you're talking about. They very likely may not. And so you don't want to go in with any assumptions. You want to explain everything well, and you want to do it so that a layperson could be able to understand it. Again, the IRB, they're normally, different, a pretty good level, at least in my personal opinion. But if you do say jargon, say that you're an infectious disease doctor, and use jargon that, someone there who may not know, that may be a hang up because they just didn't understand what exactly you're trying to say there. And so I just would point that out, that work with your mentor on this, but I do think that it's great practice. And I learned a lot from my mentor and having an opportunity to do this. Okay, so I wanted to give you guys an actual example of a research question that I proposed a while back, just a concrete example and a proposal that I had to give. And so I wanted to always start with the goal. And so my goal was, I was studying the aims to identify the cultural diversity at my medical school and how they were implementing this approach. And so my specific research questions that I was trying to check off is, 1, what's the priorities there as it relates to diversity and culture? What are students' opinions about the incorporation of diversity and culture? And then how is the information being taught, at least in the first year curriculum? How does it address ethnicity, nationality, religious backgrounds, sex, gender, sexual orientation, and class differences? And so those were the things that I was trying to check off with my methods in my research question. And so again, like, though my goal was one thing, I wanted to say, like, 1A, I will do this. 2, I will do this. 3, I'll do this. And for me, that helped to break down all the different things that I was trying to accomplish. Though I could have had a project probably just on research question 1, I was interested in certain things, and I thought they all 3 fed together in order to answer my overall goal. And so this is how you take take one idea that you have, you can break it down into very concrete steps, so that when your methods and whatever results you get, you can directly relate to one of the research questions. Okay, so as I was making my research question, I thought about feasibility. So 1, did I have the resources to do this? Did I have enough experience? I didn't. So I needed to get a subject matter expert to come in and help me with that. And so that was something that I thought about. 1, is it interesting? So I thought, yes, this is certainly interesting, but I needed to be able to tell my faculty why it was interesting. So not just that, if you have a diversity statement at my school, you have to back it up. And so this is one way to say, like, hey, like, students care about diversity, students want to help evaluate diversity. Here's a way to do that. And so if you want student-led, you want diversity, this should be interesting for you. And I kind of like played my hand, and that happened to work for me. Was it novel? No other student had to tackle anything like this. And as far as I knew, faculty hadn't surveyed students and themselves on diversity measures. So I thought yes, this is novel. Again, there could have been another project that found a null hypothesis, or that they found negative results when they did it. But that was, as students were moving in and out, it could be a different time. And so that could have been 5 years ago. Now this new 5 years, these new students, I wanted to look at that. So again, it does not have to be a completely new project. I just wanted to state that again. I was looking at a completely different population in a different time frame. Again, is it ethical? So that's something that you want to work, and it'll be confirmed by the IRB. And then is it relevant? So is it addressing a significant educational problem? In my opinion, it certainly was. And so I used my significant statement to say that this is something that needed to be done as a result. Okay. So I also put SMART goals in. It's just the same thing I kind of said, but it's a better way for me to remember things. So SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and then time-based. And so I wrote these here, but you just want to make sure that, again, as you're narrowing things down, are you being specific? Do you actually have something that's actually measurable? So if you're measuring attitudes, you can do that. It's good. You need a survey to do that. And so it's not just one of those things where you're saying, I'll just ask people. If you want to have a validated way of doing that, because research is very much so something that needs to be repeatable. And so measurable and repeatable are important steps. Can you actually get it done? If you have lack of funding, do you have, what can you do instead if you don't have the funding? How can you finagle different ways of getting your project done? I think I've beat relevance to a pulp, but again, it keeps coming up for a reason. And then time-based, I think I also beat time to a pulp as well. But again, throwing all these things out here because I certainly went into medical school with these lofty goals of creating this completely different project. I thought it was going to work, and you get hit by so many things. And so again, you want to think about these things very early on and have contingency plans to make sure that you know whether things will work or won't work. So methods. So I always use the who, what, when, where, why, and how. It was something that a professor re-emphasized this year. And so one of my research professors did this, and it clicked for me. So who, so you always want to, when you're writing your methods, you want to talk about who's participating in the study. Do you have an age limit? How large is your sample size going to be? And again, is your sample size going to be representative of the population? So it may be a good place for you to ask a statistician. I'm going to say, hey, if I want to do 100 people and this is the population size, is this going to have a strong enough statistical correlation or relevance for me to be able to really argue? The word is power, I'm sorry, but does it have enough power for me to argue what I'm trying to argue in my goal? What process is the steps involved for you to replicate this? Are you writing it clearly? Could you give this to someone in your family and for them to replicate it as well? Or are you very specific with your steps? Again, there's a balance by being too specific, but you want to make sure that you don't jump any steps, and that if you didn't have the knowledge that you had, you'd still be able to get to the end goal. When are you going to do this project? Over years, months? Is this data from 2 years ago that you're reviewing? Secondarily, are you starting from today's date and moving prospectively into a date until you just enroll everyone? Those are things that you want to consider in the when. Where is it going to be affiliated with your institution? Are you going to do community-based research? Those are important because when you write those things in, different communities may have different practices, and then you also may get different results. So where is important? Why? So why are you taking the steps that you're doing? And why is there a specific order? Are you recruiting first, or are you doing a preliminary study first and then recruiting, and then justifying why you're doing that? And then lastly, how? So what statistical measures do you have? Are you doing statistics? Are you kind of doing analysis through Excel? If you're doing Excel, great, but state that. And then also probably bring in a statistician at some point, because you may think that you have all of the facts, but they may clearly tell you that you just need a little bit more power. And so that there's nothing wrong with that, but get people involved early on in your project. So I put project 1 and 2 here, and I'm running a little bit out of time, but I just wanted to I put these here because I want to talk about the difference between the two different projects. And again, something my professor showed during a lecture of mine at my school. And it was about these two students who wanted to do two different goals. And so one student had an idea. They wrote about how they were going to do a podcast, and they didn't give any information. I didn't know what their view was after. I didn't know how they were going to do it or what their aims were. And so I wrote here on the left side, the project 1 is just not specific. But then you have project 2 over here that's looking at a television program that they're trying to evaluate major depressive disorder, and coming up with goals on how to do that, to see if their documentaries really looked into how to portray people who have major depressive disorder. They wrote TV show that they were going to do this, and that the time frame was probably over a year. And so that's a little lofty to be able to say that a medical student is going to be able to watch this much TV of all 5 shows that happened in the past 5 years. It's just not, it just really isn't realistic unless you don't study and watch a lot of TV, which just doesn't make sense to me. However, so again, like just finding the balance between being not specific enough and the goals not being particularly outlined, but also your goals being a little unattainable. And so you want to, maybe scope it down, and then you'll have things that you can do later on based on what the results that you find in your study. Creating a project schedule. So this is something that I did. So I thought that this graph was, this table was helpful for me. I wrote which week I was going to be doing each thing. I wrote what activities I was going to accomplish, and then what my outcomes were from that. So I don't necessarily know if this is a I or B thing. I just know it's a way for me to become organized, and so that I could look to say, okay, I'm going to do this on this day. I'm going to do this on this day. And then I'm going to check in with these people. And that way, if I also padded this. I knew it would take me a week to do something, but I gave myself 3 weeks because I would rather be ahead of schedule than behind schedule, which hopefully segues into my budget. And so I certainly should refer to the PIs that are on here. But in my personal opinion, I found that for budgets, you want to be specific. So if you're thinking about making flyers, you need to incorporate the ink, the paper, and the printer. If you need to get someone from Staples to help you, you want to think about that. And so if you need someone else to come in, like a subject matter expert, you want to take into consideration their hourly rate and their time. I also found personally that I over budget within reason, because I found that it is easier to return money than it is to ask for more money. And so that's something that I think that's a good question to ask our PIs. I don't know. I'm sure I know why that is. It's just that personally, I just believe that you would rather, you don't want to say like, hey, I don't have enough money to complete this project. It's like, oh no, we gave you what you asked for. So we expect some type of outcome at the end of this. So just things that could keep it in consideration. Again, I recommend that you run this by your mentor. Don't do this on your own. It was not pretty, and you should definitely get someone to help you with that. But I just want to put that there for you. Lastly, so I know I'm right here on time, I just want to just focus a little bit on product dissemination. So I just wanted to let you guys know that if you guys are doing research with any community partners, or you're doing research in the community, please get the community involved. There's already a lot of distrust in the in communities with the medical community. I can't tell you guys how much of a difference it'll make if you reach out to community partners who are doing the research, who are doing the work that you're researching, and get them involved and you tell them how you're going to disseminate the plan. Let them look at your proposal, get them involved early. They can help you recruit, 1, and then 2, it can also help you make your dissemination plan relevant to them, because again, that is the population that you want to give the information to, as well as the academic community. So I just want to take the time. Community research is rewarding. Getting people involved early in the community is rewarding. And so I just want you to do that, as well as anticipating any challenges that may come up. So I just gave what my outcomes are, and I can release this if anybody wants this, but just put your email in. I can just show you what I wrote, what my outcomes of my final project was, and then the anticipated challenges that I had, just to be able to let my mentor know. Lastly, always creating homework for you all. So hopefully you'll begin drafting your proposal. Hopefully you'll complete your literature review. It should have been about 2 months now that the literature review is happening, and or getting very close. And then hopefully you'll start looking at your abstract, so that when we have our next panel, you'll kind of have some questions that can really guide your learning. And that will happen in December. So it's always the third Thursday of the month. So without that, I will turn it over to Alex, excuse my tardiness, and for you to introduce our panel.
I'm so excited for you guys. I'm so excited for our panel. Thank you guys so much for being here. All right, well, without further ado, I'll just go ahead and introduce our panel, and we'll start the questions. All right, our first panelist is Kristen Gaffney, Dr. Kristen Gaffney, and she is a gastroenterologist. And then we have Dr. Sibel Kase. She's an associate professor at Georgetown University School of Medicine. And then we have Jose Richard, who is also a DOMD candidate at Michigan State University College of Medicine. And then we have Whitney, who was also our host as well. And I would love to always start this off with just having our panelists talk about their journey, kind of introduce themselves a little bit more and just go a little bit more in depth. So kind of talk about where you started and kind of where you are currently. And then I will start with Dr. Kase.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be with you guys today. It's a real pleasure. So I'm an associate professor of medicine at Georgetown University, and I've been here for about 8 years. I've had a long circuitous journey, but I started out as a medical student at the University of Chicago. And when I was in your shoes, I did have interesting questions that I found that I wish I could have answered, but I didn't actually have the tools to do it at that time. And I remember one of the things that really intrigued me was, the University of Chicago is in the South Side, and I was very interested in pediatrics. And I found that a lot of the women that we delivered there weren't breastfeeding their children. And I was very intrigued by that. And I wondered why. Why were women, and primarily African-American women, using formula? It was something that really disturbed me, but I never got to answer the question. And I don't know if it's still something that's very present there. But it took for me to go through residency training and then my fellowship when I went back and did a master's in epidemiology to really gain research skills. So I'm really proud of you that you're interested in research now and that you're applying yourself now to answer important questions that you identify as you go through your medical school years. It's never too early to start. And if you're like Whitney, then you're already a pro. And what my research now actually is, so I do research most of the time. I also do clinical work as an infectious diseases physician, both on the inpatient side as well as outpatient. I see a lot of patients with HIV, and my research is focused on HIV, and I do some COVID related research now as well.
Thank you so much. Dr. Gaffney, if you can go next.
Absolutely. Can you all hear me pretty well? Awesome. All right, so my name is Kristen Gaffney, and as you see, I am a gastroenterologist and hepatologist practicing in private practice here in Nashville, Tennessee. My interest in research actually started in undergrad. I went to a small historically Black college in Talladega, Alabama, known as Talladega College. And if you were a science major at Talladega, you were kind of pushed in to do research during your summer breaks. You were not given the opportunity to work summer jobs. So my interest really sparked about then. I did several summer research programs in undergrad, Kansas State University, Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And at that time, I was actually interested in an MD, in a PhD track. So got very involved and intrigued in it. When I chose the medical school route, I did my residency within the Cleveland Clinic Health System out in Cleveland, Ohio, and my interest became very into IBD as I began to seek GI fellowships. Did a lot of research in the African American community with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, colorectal cancer. Most of my research has been clinical. Don't do much bench side, and have not participated in a lot of bench side since undergrad. But my interest now in the clinical, and I'm sure the other panelists can say, in private practice, it becomes a little more of a liability to do. But I have some med students at Meharry that were looking at doing review articles and things of that sort, but moving a little away more from the clinical side. I will say, Whitney, I am very proud of you for putting this together. I think this is something that is very needed in our community. I think this is something that we are definitely not only minorities in the field, but also in this particular area of research. And as you were on the panel with me when we gave that talk about colorectal cancer, I definitely feel our absence of faces within the research community has definitely put a lot of mistrust within the Black community to be participants to assist in powering a lot of studies. um, going forth. I know with colorectal cancer, I know a lot of the fear of, the COVID vaccine in the Black community is that. So I feel the more people that look like us that are in research and continue to engage in research may only enhance the participants that we're able to get to assist in powering community, powering studies that are beneficial to us. We just have so much mistrust, as you guys were saying earlier, from the Tuskegee uh, project. So kudos to you, Whitney, and keep up the good work with this.
Thank you so much. Jose, can you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I'm Jose. I'm a DO PhD candidate at Michigan State University. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I did my undergraduate at Northeastern University. And then came here to MSU. I'm defending my PhD next semester. So 6 years in. It's been a long time, couple more years to go. So I'm really excited to chat with you. And I also am here representing the American Physician Scientists Association. So that's APSA. And we are similar to SNMA, and it's a student-run organization for physician scientists. So people who, MDs, DOs, and dual degree students, a bulk of our membership are dual degree students. And so we're here to support that training. And I serve as the president-elect for APSA. And yeah, so I'm really excited in terms of my research. My PhD is in microbiology. I study the evolution and infectious disease, evolution of pathogens and infectious disease epidemiology. So particularly of importance now, and sort of people are aware of the things that, or at least some of the techniques that we use in the lab. And I'm happy to chat about getting into research and some of the programming that we have at APSA as well, to support folks getting into research.
Thank you so much, Jose. All right, so now we're gonna move into our question part of the webinar. If you guys have any questions to any of our participants, if you have any questions, feel free to put it into the chat, and we would love to ask our panelists about it. But I'm gonna go ahead and direct some of our questions here that we have already. So our first question is, if I'm most interested in clinical medicine, is it necessary for me to be well-versed in research and having knowledge of research proposals? And I'll actually start with Whitney. And Whitney, you can introduce yourself as well.
I'm sure they're tired of hearing about me, but Jose, I'm sorry, I did not put your name there. So please, I apologize for that. I just want to start off with that. So very quickly, I just wanted to say that I certainly came into this being more so interested in clinical medicine. I stumbled across research. So Dr. Kasey is at Georgetown. I applied to the clinical and translational research program at Georgetown, thinking this is going to help me boost my GPA. I can make it into medical school. I felt bamboozled because I got into this research program that had a bunch of MDs, people who were already doing research, and I was one of the only undergrad students. I said, wow, I'm not sure about this. But at some point I came across a wonderful mentor named Dawn Fishbein, who just showed me how important research was to clinical medicine, because she was one of the only people advocating for her patients. And the best way to do that was I saw through this clinical continuum of care. And so she was certainly doing research on the medicine. And so she was using that to feed her practice and finding best practices that she was sharing at national conferences. And so I thought, hey, research is not just bench work, which is important. And I want to emphasize that again and again and again. And then also she was finding patient populations at where she works at in DC. She was finding that a lot of African-American patients were there, and she was getting them involved in research. So not just was she doing hepatitis C treatment, she was getting Black patients in for Gilead. If you guys aren't familiar with Gilead or Harvoni, they have a cure for hepatitis C, but they were not finding like minority patients in that group, right? And so the doctors who were saying that, yes, this drug is effective, they weren't showing that Black patients were in the study with them. And so she was helping to push that number and to show, hey, you know, this is safe and effective in Black patients, minority patients. So yes, I started off saying that I am only interested in clinical medicine. However, I saw that this trial, one, gave opportunities to patients who may or may not have had it before. Two, it helped get patients comfortable with research. And three, it helped to show that if you practice good clinical medicine, you can demonstrate and establish these best practices to share with other clinicians who may be finding different findings that you are, and vice versa. So I would say that yes, even if you are just interested in clinical medicine, which is what I am, I certainly see the value of research, and I'm interested in research because I want to use that to find best practices and be able to share that with those as well, and those who are also interested in minority research in the medical community. So a roundabout way to answer that question, but I'm extremely passionate about that.
Awesome. Dr. Gaffney, if you can answer the question as well.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to piggyback off Whitney. I definitely think it is something important to have under your belt for multiple reasons. One, let me go to the basics. I'm sure every med school now and residency programs and fellowships, you know, they have courses on biostatistics, et cetera, and just kind of understanding the basics of research, the basics of how studies are powered, the basics of the outcome, and knowing how to interpret that data is very important. As you are going to be prescribing the medications, you are going to be obtaining tests and you need to know, you know, number needed to treat, et cetera. I think that understanding that basic information is extremely important. As far as learning how to write a research proposal, you know, a lot of them now, you are doing, you know, collaborative work with, you know, other residents, fellows, med students. You do have a mentor. And so a lot of that stuff is kind of already built in and done for you. But I will say that I do think that it is important to take that initiative to at least learn how to do some of the groundwork on your own. Understand the process that goes behind it, because I'm sure everybody on this panel can tell you it's hard work. It's something that you have to, when you're starting to look for a research project that you're interested in, a topic, it has to be something that you're interested in. It's something that you have to be passionate about, because there is a lot of hard work that goes into it, a lot of, you know, literature searches, et cetera. So it's something that again, the passion has to be there. And dedication. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste somebody else's time, and you don't want to waste somebody else's money. But I again, I'm going to say exactly like Whitney, going a roundabout way. I definitely think it is an amazing tool going into clinical medicine.
Does any of the other panelists want to weigh in on this? Okay, well, I'll move on to our next question. Are there any biases that go into selection of proposals for grants, such as African-American researchers being selected for grants at the National Institute of Health and other prestigious institutions? And I will start with Josue.
Yeah, you know, I think there's plenty of data from the NIH. There was a paper, maybe, time is irrelevant to me with writing, but it might have been last year that showed, you know, that even certain types of research that sort of were undervalued by the NIH. And I think that was a really important finding. It surprised folks, but not to me, and maybe not to other folks in the call. And it was saying that community-based work and things that that folks already talked about on the call were sort of less funded by the NIH, and they preferred things that were, you know, single cell RNA-seq or something, rather than these community-based studies. And I think it's really important to just think about that, and what is important to you as an individual, and what's important to your community. And I think as we continue to have diverse voices at the tables at NIH and these review panels, then you know, the type of work that is funded will also change. Not to say that people folks are not doing that other work as well. I think there's just a larger proportion. The paper that I referenced showed that there was a large topic of choice influenced that as well. In terms of that funding disparity, there were more African Americans who focused on community-based work than their white colleagues.
Dr. Kasey, if you can talk a little bit about this.
I try to answer that more from the perspective of what happens when a proposal comes in, for example, to the NIH. I was sitting on a review panel yesterday with 20, 30 other people from around the country. And quite honestly, I can tell you that in the discussion of the project, we don't really talk about who is this person. We talk about their training, what research they've done, what work are they proposing, is it relevant, is it important, does it fill an important gap, and is it a high quality study that will move the entire knowledge base forward. And I'll tell you this, there are a lot of excellent grants that get submitted. I don't think there was a single not excellent grant, but not everyone will get funded. And the things that I've learned along the way, I think you're right. Sponsors have specific goals and there are things that they're looking for. So if there's a mismatch between what an individual is proposing and what the sponsor is looking for, it won't work very well. And, shifting that needle to encompassing, all of the considerations, the diversity issues, the social determinants of health, those are things that are increasingly being talked about, but, the pendulum hasn't quite swung all the way. But that said, the pool of underrepresented minorities in any one of these who's putting forth these grant proposals is very, very limited. So I'm not at the table where people make the ultimate decisions, where they may weigh in some of these things, because I think they do ask. I'm not at that table. So when it comes to the actual decision, I don't know how those things get weighted. But I will say one thing is, deciding that you want to have a life in research, a career in research, it's daunting, it's difficult. There will be a lot of obstacles, and you have to have the stick with it attitude if this is what you want to do. And always remember, there are multiple ways to get to where you want to go. It's not, you may have an end vision and you always keep that vision in your head. But if you go down one path and you find an obstacle, you find another path, and find the people who enable you and who provide you with opportunities. And if you find a roadblock, then step away from that person, that thing, whatever it is, redirect, but find your core mentors, find the people who back you up. Because I wouldn't be here if I didn't find those people, because it isn't easy. There are a lot of hurdles. I don't know if those hurdles were because of who I am and where I'm from and what I look like. But certainly I know without the persistence and the resilience, I wouldn't be here.
I'll also mention too, where I think the question, it looks at sort of like end stage career when you're sort of writing, these big grants like an R01 or something. But there is so much support for folks who are underrepresented in medicine in terms of grants from the NIH. And so I think that is a real positive. So there's, if you're a dual degree student or an undergrad or high school student who wants to do that path, there's, I believe it's F30 or F31, and one of those is a diversity grant. And so if you're underrepresented in medicine, I think the government rules are very specific. I think it's racial or ethnic minorities, but those that's a really good opportunity. And then secondly is that you can advocate for your mentor to apply for a diversity bonus on their grant or diversity funding on their grant. So if they have these large institutional grants at R1 or these center grants, they can specifically apply for funds to support trainees. So that's something that I learned sort of later on in my training, that my mentor could apply for funds for me from the NIH. So those are some opportunities to think about.
Thank you so much for that, Jose. Did anyone else on the panel wanted to add anything to that? Okay, I'll move on to our next question. Do I need to get an MD PhD in order to participate in research? I'll start with Whitney.
Ooh, since I don't have one and I'm not going for it, I did think at one point I did want a MD PhD. I won't. I would be lying if I didn't say the years in that made me turn away. I do personally think that at our first panel we had one of my mentors, Dr. Akanji, came on and said that the difference he believed he had an MD PhD. He talked about how the PhD helps you to get that scientific rigor and to really narrow down steps. You do a dissertation, those aspects. In my personal opinion, I've seen MDs do wonderful things. I think I got a lot from my master's program. I saw, some of that I didn't do it for as many years as a PhD, but I feel like I got enough training that I feel comfortable that I would be able to do it without the PhD, but I don't want to overstep. And I would love to hear from an MD PhD candidate or someone else who has their MD. But I also want to say that thank you to Dr. Sagunro for hopping on. Just wanted to point out that she's here as well. So Dr. Sagunro, I know you're not shy, so I'm sure you'll hop into questions as well. So sorry, Alex, I'll throw it back to you.
No, no worries. I think this is a perfect transition for Jose to get in there.
Yeah, sure. Definitely, from my perspective, you're totally right. And at APSA, we support all sorts of different trainees, and I noticed somebody through our website on the chat, so I really appreciate that. And there's a lot of different paths that you can go. You can do MD, DO, you can do the dual degree. From my experience, sort of at the end, reflecting on my PhD, you have some really, I realize now it's like some really just good time to focus on yourself as a scientist and develop. And I think med school is just way more intense in terms of the, sort of that rigorous schedule and having to do X, Y, and Z and exam and this. And so you're fitting in that research when you can. And with the PhD, the time is all you. And so you could do an 8-year PhD, you can do a 3-year PhD. And it's really about focusing on yourself and your training. And so that's what I really love about now that I'm at the end of it, or at least the PhD. But I have mentors who just have an MD. There are fantastic physician scientists who just have a DO, and then obviously both. And I think one thing I'll say about just what I've seen in terms of the difference is that only just like a strict PhD scientist tends to really, in my experience or what I've seen, tends to really focus in on a specific method or a set of tools and then apply those tools to various questions. And what I've seen from physician scientists is that they're really looking at a clinical problem or a public health problem and collaborating with folks or using bringing in a team together to address that specific question rather than I got these set of tools. Let me see X amount of questions that I can answer with these tools. So that's what I've seen as just like the difference between a physician scientist who, community, bring people in, try to get as much skills to answer this question versus I got these skills. How many questions can I answer?
Awesome. Dr. Gaffney, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say the exact same thing, just like Whitney. I was actually a little discouraged by just the timing of it. The length of the MD PhD program. I will say, Jose, you're at a very fine institution. I actually looked at that institution decades ago, some time ago. I'm telling my age on that one at Michigan State. I will say though, you have the opportunity, once you start medicine and you grow into, your niche, or you have questions that you want to address, as far as from, developing your own research, I think where you're at is really plays a key role. And what I mean by that, if you're at an academic institution, Georgetown, Cleveland Clinic, where I did my GI and my liver and my biliary training over in Dallas, Texas at Baylor. I mean, the opportunity to do clinical research was there. The opportunity to do bench side research, collaborate with PhDs and DOMD PhDs. I mean, that availability is there. And I agree with Jose that, I mean, it's interesting because he's going to have the best of both worlds, where he can come from both aspects. Where I definitely think that, when I'm doing my clinical research, I've collaborated with Rick Bowen, who's a PhD, over at Baylor, but they definitely bring different aspects to the table, the PhD candidates.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our panelists that weighed in on that. I think we have a question in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and.
Can I just add one thing? Sorry.
Right. No,
I just wanted to just to mention, I said, PhD gives you that structured time, but you're going to also have structured time if you specialize. And, I think that's what was mentioned before, but during your fellowship, if you do a fellowship, a lot of that time is just structured research time. And again, if you're at a very academically focused institution where there is a lot of research, you can have a PhD experience during that time. And a lot of fellowships do that, where you can get an MPH, a master's in clinical science, and even a PhD during that time in your fellowship. So there's so many different routes. It doesn't have to be that you just did the MD and you can't get it later. People do that too. So
thank you so much for jumping in on that one. So we have a question in the chat. I want to go ahead and pose it to you guys. What are your thoughts on creating a research proposal that will most likely be hard to receive grants due to the lack of profitability? An example of this would be an implementation of a free clinic gardens to improve diets or use herbs in patients that cannot afford conventional medicine. And I'll start with Dr. Kase.
So yeah, so these are difficult, right? So you know that if you change someone's diet, this should lead to better health, lower obesity rates, and all of the comorbidities that come associated with obesity. But if you put it as, I'm going to start a community garden, you'd have to make it really rigorous, right? So again, if there is a lot of times what you'll find is that when you write a proposal, you can just write it out of thin air, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to go look in the National Institutes of Kidney and Digestive Disorders. I'm going to see what kinds of things they're funding, and I'm going to try to fit this within one of those. So if they're interested in, and there are more and more implementation science, calls for proposals that will fit into something like this, then that's great. Then you have to make it rigorous, right? Then your measurements have to be rigorous. There are plenty of people who do community-based research around diet, exercise. It may not quite be the community gardens. And so that may be a very unique bent now, but now go back and think about what Whitney asked you. How are you going to do this? Do you have the garden space? Who are you going to partner with to actually do that? And are people interested, right? Is it safe for people to go out and garden? And, you have to think about all of the nuances around that. But if this is something that you want to do, then that's something you you need to fit it into the paradigm somehow. But I think there are different ways to do it. You have to be creative, but you have to be rigorous, right? Because whatever information you produce has to be replicable, it has to be feasible, and it has to be something that can be replicated at scale. So just because you do it in one environment with someone funding it with a lot of money, does that mean that you can do this and take it out into the community and implement it at scale? Those are all considerations you have to take. And you also have to look at your funders, right? There are different type of funders. Not everything has to be from NIH or from the federal government. There may be some philanthropists who, you know what, they really are interested in this. And so it's really keeping an open mind, doing your homework, doing your research, and being rigorous. Unconventional, the herbs, there are institutes within NIH where they do study alternative medicine. Again, we've done some research related to vitamin C, for example. You'd have to think about it, but really knowing what's in those herbs is, I think, key. And people will often bring tinctures and powders and plants and tell me I should do research on them. It's not what I do, but I'm sure somebody does it. But there are very different skill sets that go into that, right? So if you want to do that, then, really pay attention in your pharmacology, because that may be part of what you have to embed into your research project is a pharmacologist who can really get into the weeds with you on that kind of research.
Thank you so much. Whitney, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that was the whole thing. Just even like the smallest detail of when you start thinking about a garden, right? What type of soil are you going to use? What herbs are we talking about here? Who in the community are you doing this for? And then like using the term conventional medicine, your mentor is probably going to want to have, again, like Dr. Kasey, so you want to have somebody on your team who specializes in conventional medicine, right? And so maybe not just a PharmD, but like someone who actually knows conventional medicine. And I also wanted to do a blast plug for community. Like if you're using the community, there may be people in this community who are already doing this. They already have the space. The community may want to invest in this as well. And so I think, if you want to partner with the community that's already doing this, they kind of already have the space, they're interested in this. And then you can kind of help them with a little bit with the grant funding and bring some rigor to it. I think projects like this can be really valuable. But just like Dr. Kasey said, you just want to make sure that those steps are done and that you have a plan because of how to measure it and then how you're going to disseminate the information. So it's like, okay, great. The diet, it improved, but what was your outcome? Were you trying to see how they manage their diabetes? Were you managing like overall health? And then what does overall health mean? So I think just narrowing those things down. But I think those type of projects, again, are really interesting. They just take a lot of work to because they're unconventional. But that's all I have to add.
So I just want to flip around to one more thing that now it's attracting my attention. If someone can't afford a medicine that everyone should have access to, is the answer to find something else that's free and cheap, or is the answer to get them access? Right? So, and what's the right approach to do that? And who do you work with to, again, it's an implementation issue. So when, as Whitney told you guys earlier, when in 2000, what was it, 12, 13, 14, as the new Hep C medications were coming online, they cost $90,000. And, it was very hard for us to get that for our indigent patients in DC. And Dr. Fishbein, others from NIH partnered with the pharmaceutical company, and we treated 600 patients in the community, in community clinics. And the experiment was, can non-infectious disease / hepatologists treat hepatitis C without increasing the risk to the participants? So they made the drug available to us. We were the subjects. The medication was standard of care. It was the best drug out there. And what they found that they published was family medicine and internal medicine doctors can treat hepatitis C as well as infectious disease physicians in a community setting without worse outcomes, be it in the cure rates or in side effects. Flipped it all on its head. Now there's no reason to not let everybody treat, right? And then in time, of course, the prices came down. It gave our health departments time to negotiate these prices down. More products came on the market, and the best drugs are now available to our community. But the answer wasn't to say, we can't afford this, let's find something else. And so I really applaud that team. You know, this is not the typical bench or cutting edge research that NIH usually does. This is the community embedded, you know, really trying to, it's service mixed with research. And it really was, I think, really beautifully done. So just because, don't try to find other solutions. If you think something is best for the community, you really should strive to, how can I get to that? How can I get this for everybody who needs it?
I love that so much, Dr. Kasey. I really, my ear kind of perked up when you asked that question about access. I was like, man, that's so awesome. Did anyone else on the panel wanted to add to that or feel like they have any commentary? No?
I'll
Okay.
just say, I think, with just the comment about herbs, we think of these things as non-traditional medications. And I think her name's Cassandra Quave. She's at Emory. I should look her up, but she's a fantastic pharmacologist, and she calls herself an ethnobotanist. And she does this really cool research where she travels the world and partners with social scientists to interview people about the types of medications that they're doing and plants that they have in the different regions. And then she comes back to their lab. One, she partners with the NIH and other folks to get resources to these individuals. So it's not just about interviewing them and taking something, but she's bringing something to the community. And then they do this crazy chemistry where they fractionate and they identify the active compounds, and they're working with the FDA to establish that sort of pharmacokinetic properties of what has been sort of established and written down in these written or oral traditions. And so I thought that was a fabulous example of, like, we think about what folks are telling us is not true because we don't see it, but it's probably just because it hasn't been studied in a way that is rigorous enough to identify those things that are really happening. And so that's a fantastic example of that.
And it looks like Melissa, thank you so much for that. It looks like Melissa went ahead and dropped that in the chat, so you guys can check that out. And there's some great stuff happening in the chat, so make sure you guys are checking those links out. All right, I'm gonna move on to our next question here. We need to go for it.
I think Dr. Saguna was raising her hand.
Oh, I didn't see it. Where's she at? Where is she?
Hey there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Just wanted to jump in real quick on that plant discussion. So in graduate school, I was working on my master's degree in a lab here in Connecticut, and we were actually using primitive plant extracts, something called Primaplex, to work on the destruction of particular tumor lines, particularly glioblastoma. The professor that I worked with, Dr. Sarah Crawford, we used basically phyto extracts from plants, looking at their tumor effects in terms of cytokinesis and basically being able to impact tumor cells. I was only in the lab for about a year. But I did want to let you know that that is like a legit area that people are working on. And this was 12 years ago. So, I mean, it's probably come so far now. But I did want to just jump in there really quick about that's actually like a real legit thing that people are doing. So.
And did you want to also plug the Do influence real quick?
Maybe at the end.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our next question. So what advice would you give to a student that has an idea of a topic and that they are interested in, but is having a difficult time scoping down the question to have a strong research proposal? And I'll start with Dr. Gaffney.
Okay. The biggest thing that I think, and the most important thing that I feel that you can have as a student, period, especially as you start to venture off into your research interest, is finding a good mentor, someone who is enthusiastic about research and has that same or equivalent passion about teaching. I will tell you, going into in residency, I mean, you can find somebody who will have you be their quote unquote, hate to say it like this, but frankly, a workhorse. But if you're genuinely interested in doing more than just publishing a paper or getting your name on a paper, finding someone and seeking out a mentor is the biggest step that you can take. They will assist you in guiding you on formulating the question, and they can actually even bring out of you maybe even questions that you couldn't even think of yourself, especially as you're beginning on this path. But I think that is premier. I still talk to and have communication with my mentor from when I was an intern in first year, a resident, Dr. Boshin at Cleveland Clinic. I mean, amazing mentor, loves to teach. And so that's the biggest advice. You have to find someone who's going to guide you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kasey, did you want to add on to that?
I agree. I think the mentor really is key. And, you know, that it's not easy to do, but be persistent, be consistent, be responsive, right? So if you reach out, someone emails back, let them know you're appreciated, you got it, and you may be busy. We know you guys are busy, right? But always respond. And even if you decide that something is not quite fitting for you, make sure you don't burn bridges, right? So end relationships in a very respectful way, even if you have to move on, because not everything will work out. And then don't forget your peers, right? So the mentor sometimes ends up being a little hierarchical until you grow into you're now my peer. My mentor is now kind of my peer, even though he's 20 years older than me. But so there'll always be, it's a much more level playing field to some extent now. But my peers were always instrumental, right? And always focus back on, why do I want to know this? And for me, as Whitney was going through her presentation, for me, it's always about, what's the question? What's the question? What's the question? Don't write it like it's science. It just should be plain English. Like, what is the problem that I'm trying to address? And you need to be able to articulate that. It sounds easy, it's not. It can take like writing it a million times in a million different ways to really nail it, but it should be very simple. And once you have that, and sometimes it's talking it out with each other, right? And where did you see I'll tell you, for me, the most excited I've gotten about research projects is when it's based on something that I've seen, a problem that I've seen. So in my clinic, one thing I saw when I first moved to DC, I moved here from the West Coast, and their HIV was primarily a problem among MSM, and it was a very distinct epidemic. I came to DC, and I'm in a small clinic in Southeast, and very grateful to be working there, and I'm doing research the rest of the time. And I was sitting across the table from my partner. Like I said, it was a very small clinic. We shared a desk. And he was talking about a patient, and I said, who is he talking about? And turns out my patient was the daughter of his patient, and he also was taking care of the grandmother. So we had 3 generations with HIV between the two of us. And I was like, what is going on here? So that made me think, you know what, we need to understand a little bit better what the transmission dynamics are in this city, because this is not anything like what I saw in California. And that was one of my first research questions, right? But it was based on observations. So for you as well, when your questions arise from your lived experiences, the experiences that your patients are telling you about when you get into the clinical field, then you'll be able to write the question. And once you do that, then you need different skill sets to kind of scope it down, right? So yeah, you can't do a huge randomized clinical trial that's going to cost $500,000 or more, but you might be able to start small, right? Ask questions and do surveys. So the scoping part needs expertise. Their mentor comes in, the experience, and being really genuine with your questions that you're trying to address.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kasei. Whitney, did you want to add anything to this?
I was just laughing thinking about that, because I know my very first, like when I first came into my research master's, my thesis was going to be using robots to cure children's cancer. That was literally my question. I wrote, I want to design a robot that is going to that is going to cure childhood cancer. And I remember like getting ready, putting together this beautiful presentation of like with colors, because I'm fresh out of undergrad, I have no idea. And my program director, his name was Jason Umans, and Dr. Umans just tore my project apart. He's an MD, PhD, brilliant man, and he asked so many questions, and I from there knew I had to scope it down. But he worked with me, and so I would also say, like, as you're like, if you have a question that you're passionate about, I threw that project out because I had no idea what I was doing. But the point was that I wasn't afraid to fail. I came in with the project and said, I think I'm interested in this, and I don't think I failed because I got a lot of feedback about why that was not feasible. And so I would say that, if there's something that you're interested in, go into it and say, this is why you're interested in it. If you have a good mentor or someone who wants to help you, they will laugh at you silently, and they will give you constructive feedback to help you get to where you need to get to. And I think from there, I learned by not playing it safe, and I try not to play a lot of things safe. I want to learn and I want to get better. And so I would encourage anyone, if you'd like to take the path of least resistance, I know I certainly do. That's something that I did. And so I found that by going in a little broad and ridiculous, I scoped down a question that was completely different by just taking steps that I just had no idea about how to do it. So I just wanted to encourage anybody who's thinking like, hey, my mentor has this one question. That's not my question. If you're willing to put the hard work in, I say go for it. But just recognize that you may get torn down and laughed at quite regularly. Tough skin.
All right, awesome. Jose, did you want to add anything?
I guess I'll just echo some things, being, I think we are so, I think in physician brain, it's like, you never want to be wrong. You like always want to be right, and you're pre-med and then you're med school and you're competing, and you got to get all the buttons right, and everything has to be right, and you got to circle the right one, and you got to get the 100, and you got to get the 270. And then research is completely different. Like when you're wrong, something is usually interesting. When it didn't come out the way you wanted to, it's usually like it's like, oh, that's interesting. And so it's all like, if you get to a question you don't know, your research is about finding knowledge that hasn't existed before. So it's just this constant thing of not knowing the right answer and not knowing the knowledge. And so that can be very frustrating, but rewarding. And so just having that in the back of your head that, it's not going to be, you're not going to find a right answer, right? It's about generating new knowledge. And then the thing with mentorship is so right, and having great feedback. And I remember my first paper getting edits back from Dr. Shannon Manning, my direct mentor, and it's just red. It's like red comments, just red track changes. And, I, spent weeks on this, and then another round red, another round red, fourth time go around, still a bunch of red. And it's like, these are just fabulous starts. It's like, this is the start. And then you get reviews back, and but it's just constant process of learning, of fixing things up, and that red is not detracting, it's making you a better scientist. So being able to like reframe yourself, right? It's not about, oh, I don't know stuff. It's about, oh, this is learning. So I think if you can frame it in that way, it's good.
I just want to add real quick, if you don't mind, Whitney and Jose, I think everybody on the panel has said it. I think the biggest thing that to let students and anybody interested in research know, you kind of alluded to when you said tough skin. research will put hair on your chest whether you want it or not. Okay, it will. So, I mean, it's one of those things you cannot get discouraged. It will build character in you. You cannot let those red markings. So you use those red markings as stripes, and as you're getting better, and that's what I say. Because if you go in there and you get those red marks, I will tell you, I know personally of people, they get so discouraged they walk away. All their time, their dedication, and their finances gone to pieces. Okay, stick with it, remain passionate about it. Don't get discouraged. Instead of asking, reframe your question. And I think, again, that goes back into finding the right research. But get ready to grow. And again, whether you want it or not, hair will be put on your chin.
Thank you,
I
guys.
joke with that. There's always the decline all or accept all button. You know what I'm saying? So whichever way you want to go.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. I can't thank this panel enough for all of your great, great sound wisdom. I like to, we're kind of getting down to the wire here, but I like to end with just having each one of our panelists kind of give one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self, and kind of talk about what, we're kind of in a crazy time right now. And so it's just really good to have just like simple advice from you guys and like kind of hear from you guys. So I'll actually start with Whitney.
So just to keep it relevant to our talk, I think I remember when my mentor, Dr. Fishbein, asked me to write my first abstract or to like edit a proposal that she knew was great. And just by getting asked to do something like that, I just thought like, wow, this woman is nuts. Like, why would she have me do something that she knows I can't do? Like, I have no context of doing this. And so I think by learning how to do that, I wish I would have told my younger self to stop complaining so much and to learn everything I could there. Because now going back and having a mentor who was willing to teach me, and who taught me regardless whether I wanted to be taught or not, just is something that you don't value in the moment until you look back and say, hey, this is somebody who invested in me. And so I think if I could tell my younger self anything, it would be to just enjoy the process more. I was rushing to get to medical school. I was rushing to be a research expert, and I was missing out on a lot of time in which people would allow me to fail and would allow me to learn from it, and it would be still okay, right? And so now I'm at this place where I don't think I like Jose said, I don't think I can fail right now in medical school. Wouldn't be a great investment. But as I was learning how to do research, I had plenty of opportunities to learn how to fail, to learn how to get better, and so that when I did get success, I would just appreciate it. And so I would just say, enjoy your journey. No matter what it may take, how long it takes you to get wherever you are, how long it takes you to master a proposal, take your time and enjoy it.
Great advice, Whitney. Dr. Kasey, if you can go next.
I think I really want to echo what Whitney said, because I think that always have a vision for yourself where you want to. I mean, you guys have gotten so far and you're the cream of the crop, and you have a lot that gets put on you, which is really heavy. But honestly, I hope you love what you do, because medicine, if you don't love what you do, can be really tough. But once you're here, dream big, work hard, and just remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. People tell me that about lots of different things, including my personal goals. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So if you want to get there, you got to put the building blocks up. You got to take the time to get to where you want to be. And, little impediments will happen. Life detours will happen. But in the end, the process is hugely important. And so make sure you're around people that you care about, that care about you, and enjoy trying to get to where you're going to be. And one day you'll look around and you'll be like, am I there? And you may or you may not be there, but just make sure you're somewhere where you'll be proud to be where you are.
Dr. Gaffney.
So there's a quote that I have carried with me from the time I stepped foot on Talladega College campus. It was a quote by a slave, and I use this. What I had, I spent. What I saved, I lost. What I gave, I have. The only thing that you will have is what you give to yourself and what you give to others. That goes for every aspect of your life, but looking into medicine, looking into research. Do everything for the right reasons, okay? Going into research. If you're interested in something, do something that you're passionate about. Give your all, okay? Lead with love and make your last name proud, because that's all you have.
Thank you so much for that. All right, Jose.
Oh man, that was great. I wish I wasn't last to follow that. Um, in my head, I just went immediately practical. I think it's PhD brain. I was like, learn R. That's my advice. Learn R. Learn how to program. No, that is very practical skill. If you guys have time, things like data camp, learning using Excel. If you know how to program in Python, I have this is sort of my area too, data science and things like that. And I have some undergraduate mentees who are whiz kids, and I'm like, I've been doing my entire PhD, and y'all know how to do this better than me. And so I think that is some really important skills, and it's something unique that not a lot of people can do well. And I think sort of younger people are just better at this stuff, and it can be a sort of like a plus that you bring to a team. I would say seek out mentors. You know, I feel like I've been really lucky in my decisions, and I think it's like, you know, I try to be very rigorous about where I'm gonna go, and what are the criteria that I want for medical school, etc. And what I've realized, and I did this with undergrad, and it was just this gut feeling. Um, when I walked into my mentor's office and talked with Shannon, Dr. Manning, and toured her lab, I just got this overwhelming feeling. It was like, this is where I'm meant to be. And so follow your gut, and trust your gut. If you have that feeling, if you have that understanding, that this is a good person or this is a good place for you, then that might be true. It's okay if you don't have that feeling. That's just how my life's turned out so far. Um, and lastly, take some time to reflect. I think, um, you know, that has been sort of a blessing in disguise. Being stuck at home is people are reflecting. I've been reflecting a lot. Maybe it's just because I'm walking away from the computer from writing. But you know, it's been arduous. There's been a lot of challenges, but looking back, I've had a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot, and I've grown a lot as a person. And I think if I took more time, you know, in between, like, oh man, I just passed that test, or, you know, celebrated those small victories and took some time to reflect about those things and about my passions along the way, I wouldn't have been so down on myself along the way. Um, and I think it can be a positive thing to just take some time, reflect about what's going on, and where you're going.
Awesome. I want to thank our panelists so very much for being here. For all of our participants, we will definitely have this video up on YouTube, so you can find this video on SNMH YouTube. And then also, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and leave us some feedback by going to the QR code. And I think, Whitney, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I can't, again, just want to thank the panelists. Always a wonderful panel. Thank you guys. Most of them are my mentors now, if they didn't know that. So thank you guys so much for that, and for all that you did. I did want to give Dr. Seguno the last few seconds or a minute to talk about the due influence. I think it's important. And so for those of us who are watching the recording and who are here, so that you can kind of get plugged in with the free resource.
Thank you so much, Whitney. So This was a great panel. The panelists were wonderful. It's just great listening to you all. And, I feel like I always learn when I tune into this series. So thank you so much for the series organizers and for the panelists as well. I just wanted to plug this resource. It's an online educational platform that I started earlier this year, kind of at the height of COVID, at least at the height of COVID in New England, we should say. And it's called the Do Influence. So that's DUE Influence. And it's basically a platform where it's for students where they can go on and learn about different professions and careers from those people that are in those careers. Particularly, if you want to become a medical doctor, a nurse practitioner, a lawyer, an engineer, anything in between. It's a free resource that is at www.thedoinfluence.com. On that website, you'll find videos from these different professionals about how they became that professional, kind of like an online career day. If it was all virtual and the people were actually accessible, people can sign up for mentorship through our website to basically be in contact directly with these individuals. So that ranges from physicians to nurses to engineers, to lawyers to artists, to video producers, different things like that. And it's really for students of all ages, students that are in high school trying to decide on their career, students that are in college trying to, set that career path, students that are in medical school, and even people that are early on in their career looking to make a change or just looking to network. So it's basically a community of young professionals and future professionals, and people who've been doing it for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and bringing everyone together and having it basically be something that's accessible to everyone, because I believe education should be an equal playing ground. And with education, everyone should be able to reach their aspirations. So I want to be able to help people do that. I'll type the website in the chat.
I think Alex beat you to it.
Oh, okay. He knows about it because he's already joined.
Me too.
Yes.
But thank you guys. Thank you all again so much for tuning in to our panelists. This was wonderful. And so without further ado, I'll dismiss everyone. But thank you guys again so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
guys.
Nice meeting you
Thank
all.
you
It's
for the
great.
invitation.
Thank you
I'm
so
honored
much.
to be with y'all. The panelists were awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Alex, are you still recording?